Morning, everybody. Welcome. Red morning. It's Saturday morning. Beautiful day. Enjoy your Caesars. I can hear Carl's got his on his side. How you doing, Carl?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm just getting that hair of the dog in. I got pretty fucking drunk last night. It's one of those cases where you have a girl over and you can't really drink a lot. When I try to stay reasonably sober whenever I'm dealing with girls because you never know what may slip out if you get a little overly drunk. Like I remember I had a plate over once and we shared 2 bottles of wine, meaning that I drank like 2 bottles of wine and she had like half a glass. And she kept bugging me about, my notch count and whatever. And in the end, I was just like, well, I'll give you a number. And I was like, it's not lower than 30, but not higher than 60. And she looked at me like, stop fucking lying. It's a hell of a lot higher than that.
Oh, it almost sounds like that was a wish.
And we kind of went back and forth on it. And, in the end, it was just a whole bunch of drama because I don't have much of a filter when I'm sober, and I definitely don't get better when I'm like 8 or 10 drinks in.
I'm curious now. So what'd you do? Did you just pressure flip it, or did you find out her number was 256 because she's a huge binary fan, or?
No, nothing like that. It was just, I don't even remember because I was halfway blacked out at the time. This was a couple of years back. And it's like I log a lot of shit that happens in my life, but I don't log conversations. I more log on a more conceptual level, to put it like that. So I know like what direction I'm moving in, but I'm not going to detail log everything. It's like with my workouts, like I do full body workouts 3-4 times a week. And some days I'll hit chest first, some days I'll hit back first, and some days I'll hit arms first. And that means that, if you're hitting arms first and you do like 9 sets of triceps, 9 sets of biceps, and you go to do pressing or pulling afterwards, you're not going to perform as good on the pressing and pulling as you would, if you started with pressing or pulling.
Yeah, start heavy work light.
So, but the reason why I'm doing it is just because I want to work on my arms a bit more and my shoulders a bit more. So by and they're usually what I've done last in a workout, because you figure, you don't want to burn your arms out before you're doing bent over rows or bench presses. So, but I decided, that means my arm work is always kind of half-assed because, you can't put up good weight. You can't handle the volume. So by putting one workout a week or something where I do arms first and shoulders first, I just kind of make sure they get really burned, and then I do something else for chest and back.
That is a great answer, and I still don't know your notch count. You're fucking smooth, man.
Yeah, I know.
I was thinking about this. I remember you were talking about my emails a couple of weeks back. I know the very first one I sent out about my pickup days was something like that, where I met a girl who I apparently had sex with like a month prior, but I didn't know who she was. I think that was the day that because I know every guy when he first starts like pickup or first starts getting laid, like keeps a mental tally and a notch count. And I remember that was the day that I just stopped counting anymore because I'm like, what's the point if I can't even remember? The number's not even accurate.
No, I actually keep a little black book that I write all the girls' names down in.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I only started that about 1.5 years ago, so I pretty much all of my 20s are missing from that notebook. But the reason why I'm doing it is just I like to keep like an idea of, okay, which girl was this and when did it happen, just in case I need to somehow prove something. But the problem is when you're reading through this and like 3 girls with the same name and you're like, okay, who was this girl again? I remember banging a girl who had this name, but what the fuck did she look like?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, that little descriptor at the end. I was big on names too. I'm not sure what it is about remembering the name being a big detail. Although I guess for you, that's like how you were talking about how you'd rather get a wiretapping charge than a false accusation.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, if you get hit with wiretapping, that's a slap on the wrist. Plus, who knows? They could end up changing the wiretapping laws, which means all my home movies are free to publish. I could start my own porn site.
Revenge porn now becomes legal.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't get, like, not to get into the overly controversial topics, but like I'm big on, that's why I don't share anything, pictures of the girls' names, where it happened, etc. And I just try to make them as anonymous as possible. And that's just for the reason that I'm big on not kissing and telling.
Which is smart. Most girls want discretion. If you can't do that, then it's really shooting yourself in the foot. Especially those guys. I can't remember who it was. It was a coffee house somewhere in California where those guys were doing that. They were posting their lay reports, and then somebody found out, and they ended up having to lose their business. I can't remember the details, but you know the one I'm talking about?
No, I never heard about that case.
Yeah, I wish I could. Somebody in the chat, feel free to let us know. It was guys were posting all the stuff that you said you don't post, and eventually one of the girls found it on their blog and raised a big stink about it, and they ended up losing their business over it. I think it was just because customer outcries. All right, so
yeah,
I was going to
say, that's a good chat question here. You both get dating fatigue. I got bored of dating and shagging 6 months ago, and I just can't be bothered unless she really interests me. Yeah, you got a point there. I mean, you do get burnout on occasion. Like, okay, I just can't be bothered to go out and get pussy. I'm just going to stay home and watch a movie or something. You do get hit with that at times. Like I had a Saturday like 3 weeks ago or something, where I was like, I was supposed to go on a date with a girl, and I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm going to blow her off. I'm going to sit at home. I'm going to get really drunk, and I'm going to shit post on Twitter.
A good Friday night.
I just didn't have the energy because you get tired because you actually have to be on when you're dating. And that was, I pointed that out, like most dates I've done in a day was 5. Mm-hmm. That was a Sunday. So I started off with morning coffee at 10, and I ended up with drinks at a bar at 10 o'clock at night. And, you know, the girls number 4 and 5, they're really not getting the best you because you're kind of burned out having dealt with the other girls earlier, because you do have to be aware of what you're saying. You have to be on point with your game. Even when it's starting to get natural, you still have to be kind of on. The same thing with corporate behavior, that if you can turn that on and off, but if you've been, in corporate behavior for 12 hours, you start to kind of slip. The mask slips. And that sounds a bit more psychopathy than it's supposed to, but it's just everyone wears masks depending on context. And dating is one mask. Family get-togethers is one mask. Like when you're drunk and uncle goes on a racist rant, you kind of just ignore it, and that's him and he's drunk, and we all know he's kind of racist, even though he has a Asian wife.
It's the same as when I was teaching at Fleet School. You always have to be on. You have to be a bit of a hard ass, or during a brief or a meeting. Yeah, everything you do, you kind of have to. And it's not even, I wouldn't even say, well, I guess a mask, but for me, it was just acting in the way that was expected for the situation. Like if you're working at a lumber yard, you don't exactly want to start talking about your RuPaul fascination.
No, exactly. So you're kind of working with that, and so you do get fatigue, and you also get to the point like I've knowingly bailed on hot girls just because I couldn't be bothered, or I've gone on dates and banged girls that I wasn't really attracted to just because I was missing that flag from my flag challenge. So it's like, okay, you know what? She's like a 4 on a good day in full makeup, but Azerbaijan is really fucking hard flag to get, man. I'm just gonna have to jump on it now.
That's funny. We always called them wings, like getting your different wings. But yeah, I'm not too proud to say I've done that. I slept with my boss once. She was a divisional officer, and I didn't even like her. She wasn't very attractive. I did it in like the reserve space of the ship, which is way in the back. It's like this 10-foot-10 area. It reeks like diesel fumes, and I only did it just so I could. And then my boss high-fived me after. We got to have like the best divisional interview with my performance evaluation I've ever had. Such awkwardness.
That doesn't sound like a good thing. And, that brings me back to don't bang girls you work with.
Well, that's the beauty of it. She outranked me too, so.
Yeah, well, the reason why I say it is any industry is kind of limited. So you never know. And that's why I'm not sure if it was Twitter or an essay I wrote it in, but like, you can trash talk someone, and like you can trash talk the intern who's manning the call center, and just completely trash his ass because you outrank him, etc. in the organization. Mm-hmm. But 2 years later, that intern has finished his MBA, and he's suddenly in charge of something that you need help with. And it's really hard to ask a guy for a favor if you've essentially indicated that you're depressed that he's around, when you think about all the people who could use his organs.
Oh, I really want to. Should we use the third topic first here? Because that's awesome as a segue into professionalism.
Yeah, we can do the third one first.
All right, guys, we're gonna switch it up. We were gonna talk about blue and red oceans, but I think professionalism is a nice one too. That especially, like I have seen that bite a lot of people in the ass, and it's bit me in the ass once or twice too. I lost out on my very first promotion on that because I said one errant comment in a junior ranks mess while my boss was there. And I was thinking, at least to start it off, because you're gonna have a lot more corporate knowledge than me. You've been in corporate for at least over a decade now. I was mostly military and then a little bit of corporate. So, but the idea of telling somebody to fuck off when allowing them to save face, I think that's an underrated skill.
Well, I agree with you. It's very important to be able to keep your criticism in a way that you don't burn bridges. It's like I knew a guy once who the favorite comment of his that he ever said was, "You should cultivate the skill of telling someone to go to hell and make them look forward to the trip."
Oh, I want to say they stole that from somebody because I remember seeing that quote somewhere on some chick's Facebook page.
Probably. I mean, every quote is stolen at this point, and I do the same thing, and it's kind of you kind of get why it happens. It's like when comedians get caught, with being unprofessional and stealing other comics' jokes or premises.
Right.
And it's just at some point when you have all this stuff being produced, you're going to ending up in a similar train of thought as someone else, or you may have heard someone doing that bit when you were out drinking and you don't realize that someone else came up with it and you think you came up with it, or you end up conceptualizing something that's new to you. Like I had this thing with Fish Girl, your little groupie there, a couple of weeks back, where I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that doing higher volume for triceps, forearms, and calves would get better results, just because they're muscles that are built to kind of handle huge volume. And she was like, well, there's ample research on this. This is not your idea. And I said, well, I have not read that fucking research. I've never heard about it before. It was just something that came to me based on something. And, that...
Keep going. I couldn't hear.
No, I was just... And to segue that back to professionalism, the whole call-out shit people keep doing, I think that's a great way of pissing people off. And, unnecessarily, because if someone's doing something that you think, okay, this is someone who stole this idea or whatever, DM them or something first instead of calling someone out in public for the whole, like you had that on YouTube too with the own videos or whatever they were called, where guys were just going around and, owning each other by basically shouting over the other guy. And, what the hell's the point? What do you gain from it? Yeah, you may seem, you're trying to kind of elevate your own intelligence, but you just end up looking like the socially uncalibrated douche who has to scream something out in public to make himself seem smart.
Yeah, a really crude AMOG is what it reminds me of. But and it's funny because there's red pill stuff on this too. I know Wisdom of Psychopaths was a great book, and it was on the sidebar for a while there. I don't know if you've read that one yet. I think you might have wrote it.
Kevin Dutton.
That's the one. And I like how they describe some of the things in there, living in the now, not holding grudges and that. But the part I took away from it that was the best was the psychopath has his end goal, and then he works backwards from there. I can't remember what part that was, and I'm really butchering the bit. So, for example, let's take a call out. I'm not going to mention anything specific, but somebody who thinks they're calling out and doing the Lord's work because then fakes get discovered. Let's say everybody agrees with everything he says after the call out. What happens next? And I've never seen what is supposed to happen there. So it's obviously not about making the world a better place or righting some wrong. It's obviously just some kind of ego thing. Half the time I've seen it, it's guys that have some grudge from way back anyway. Like you called my sister a whore, and now all of a sudden you're calling out somebody's Twitter account, or you're at the bar and you're AMOGing a guy just because you're worried that your girl actually likes him more than you, and you're insecure about it. I think it all stems from ego and insecurity at the end of the day.
Well, I think Freud said something like all anger comes from the ego. And it's just you're feeling hindered in some way, shape, or form. And for me, that carries over into the professional world all the time, because like you have people who have pet projects, like some division head who just got some extra money in his budget and he's doing something he enjoys. Now, you can call him out for misuse of company funds, but what do you get out of it? Like, I'm a big fan of the of just saying, well, you know, we blow millions on much dumber shit than this. You don't gain anything from it.
My boss said something similar like that too when I first started working corporate. When I was worried about my pet project, and it had like CEO approval all the way down. They were all sponsors to the thing, but I remember I was really worried about stuff, and he goes, "You know what? Don't worry about it. Like 80% of projects people have end up failing anyway. So it's almost like expected that when people do things, it's not going to be perfect the first time through. It might fail, but you know, you just do another one later, and you don't worry about it." It was really nice because it helped me get a little bit of perspective on this. Like, you can't invest too much in any one thing like this. And I think that's the other side of the coin, where you shouldn't be calling out everything because you think you're making yourself look better when all you're really doing is looking like an autistic spurg. And then don't be the guy who's so defensive over getting called out that you end up having because it takes two to have beef. We can just put it that way.
Yeah, it's my approach is just to ignore it unless it gets to a point where I feel I have to say something about it. But generally, if it gets to that point, someone is just being way too fucking spurty. And, you know, I just think I wish that we'll get to a point in the manosphere where people can just disagree on something and not be fucking spurgs about it. Like, I'm fully behind. Like, I can see some validity in most criticisms. You know, I get why people are kind of reacting negatively to the soap commercials. Because from one perspective, you know, we come from a history of snake oil salesmen selling bullshit. And that soap kind of became the epitome of it, even though it was done kind of over the top and humorless. Like when Donnie dropped something like this, use tactical soap and girls will just fall onto your dick randomly. It's like making fun of the old Axe commercials.
Yeah. I remember those.
But at the same time, we're not like in a situation where we're being spammed down by people wanting to sponsor content. So at some point, we have to accept to some degree that if people are going to put a hell of a lot of time into this, they need to get some kind of reward for it. And, you know, just doing this show, Tim, we use 2-3 hours on it, and we try to be reasonably on point, and we spend time planning the show beforehand. You spend time editing and putting out clips and making the channel art and so on. So at that point, we're probably investing close to at least 10 hours a week on this show.
Oh, easily. I probably, about 10 spare.
And, you know, when I write a 2,000-word blog post, that probably takes me close to, well, depending on, it can take anywhere from 5 to 15 hours, depending on how much research I have to do. That's why I kind of scaled back some of those heavily cited and source reference posts just with a lot of graphics, because it takes a fuck ton of time to do all that research.
Oh, I agree. Also, I got to ask, on your blog, how big is your drafts folder?
Give me a second. I'll look. I actually have the blog open in a different...
Nice. Because while you're looking, I'll mention this. So mine, it's 3-to-1. So for every post I've had on either of my blogs, there's three different drafts of different topics. And I swear to God, every time I actually get a post out, it's something I had from 2 years ago, and then finally got enough information or enough inspiration or enough examples to draw from where I can actually make it a somewhat coherent thought.
I have 209 drafts, and I have 253 published essays.
Damn. See, I like that. You got a much better work ethic than me. You finish the jobs you start.
No, the whole thing is I read this thing by Stephen King a while back, and, you know, you can criticize his writing all you want, but the guy has one hell of a work ethic. And his thing was just hammer out the shitty first draft when you sit down, or just hammer that out before you start doing anything else. So that's kind of been my role with it, is just to hammer out the first draft. I can do that in like an hour or two.
Right.
And then I just keep editing on that. And, you know, a first draft can be 3,000 words. Second draft, I might cut, 500. And the next draft, I cut 500. So I end up at roughly 2,000. And I try to kind of like, okay, well, how do I want the disposition of this essay to be? Like, how do I want to frame the content? And then I do the intro last because I like to give kind of that little, okay, this is why I'm writing about this topic, and this is the context in which I'm writing. So that's why the whole carrots and stick post I put out this week about, being red-pilled and in corporate and remaining professional, that was inspired by 2 questions I got in my email this week from readers. And, big thing with that was just, I get that it's difficult because, like, when you see obvious red pill shit going on in the workplace, like you have a girl who gets a new male boss who happens to be single and suddenly she's left her husband and kids to be with the new guy, you kind of want to say, well, it was obvious case of branch swinging. Her husband was letting his values slip and the new boss has, contextual alphaness because he's her boss and he orders her around. So it was obvious that this was going to happen. And, you just kind of slap yourself in the face and go, I'm not a fucking white belt. I do not need to let everyone know that I know this. It's the same bullshit as, you come into a corporate office and some idiot has 48 laws of power and the prince on his fucking bookshelf.
I has the alpha. Oh, there it is. Thank God.
The thing about it, it could be, I mean, most guys have actually read those books if you're in corporate management or in leadership because you kind of have to. But at the same time, you don't kind of put them up on the bookshelf. At that point, you're either being the least Machiavellian guy in existence and being like, I'm so anti-Machiavellian that I actually put these books on my shelf to show I've read it, or you're the most Machiavellian motherfucker ever. And you're putting them there to distract people away from the actual Machiavellian shit you're doing.
Fair enough. This reminds me, here's the thing. And when you were right, like, don't talk about the rules because there's no referee to call it anyway. Just play the game. And it's a subtext thing I've seen that applies in dating, in relationships, in workplace, whatever. It's that level of social awareness where you display that you know the rules without having to tell the other person when they do something you're not expecting. Because I was thinking about this, and a lot of guys love it. And it's the whole white belt thing all over again, where they love telling people, oh, hypergamy this, solipsism this, oh, and you're just doing that because, and it's very off-putting to guys because they don't like the idea of you thinking you have some kind of like magic all-seeing wand. But for girls, I find it's especially off-putting because they're used to subtext. And so when you kind of blow out the subtext, it's a DLV. There, we'll throw some PUA terms in there too. As opposed to the guy who knows she's a slut, wants to sleep with her on the first date, she's willing to sleep with her on the first date. All you have to do is not fuck it up, like you say. And the only way to screw that up is by making her feel like a slut. And so when a guy starts saying, like, getting very overt and obvious about the sexual innuendos, then her anti-slut defense comes up. And I find, and it's hilarious how often stuff that came up during the pickup days applies in life in general. So I can see how pickup artists ended up going red pill. It's because they ended up getting jobs, working for bosses, and then they're finding out that all the stuff they learned back in the mystery days are still applying.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure if you've read the. There's a 3-part essay called the Gervais Principle.
Oh yeah, Venkatesh Rao. I love that guy. I was just doing with Jack Napier Tempo. We just did a review on that.
No, but the good thing with that is you kind of get to the point where you have that power talk, and it's a way of talking where you're saying what's going on and you're kind of signaling to the other person this is what's going on, but you're not making it obvious. Because if you make it obvious, you're just going to end up in the situation where you take away all plausible deniability. And plausible deniability is central to corporate, it's central to game, it's central to anything. Because if the girl tells you, I'm not going to sleep with you on the first date, and then, she agrees to go back to your place and you're making out, she gets the plausible deniability. Well, I told him I wasn't going to sleep with him, but, we went back to his house to look at his fish tank, and it just kind of happened. Now, when you take her clothes off and you see she has a matching bra and panties on, you knew she wanted to fuck and was planning to fuck when she came out. But she has that plausible deniability. And at the same time, if you tell your boss, and if he asks you, how is so-and-so project going? And you go like, well, man, don't know where to begin. You're kind of signaling, okay, this shit is a train wreck. but you're not saying this shit is a train wreck. And by signaling that way, no one can arrest you, or, you won't get blowback from, the guy who's the project lead and is like, well, Carl said I was incompetently managing the project, so I'm going to hold the fucking grudge for 7 years, and when he's in charge, I'm going to fuck it up for him.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the red pill stuff. It's like someone gets slighted like 7 years ago because someone didn't like their post, and then, 8 years later, they do a call-out thread on Twitter over fucking soap.
And then that's the funny thing, too, because those also have the subtext. The guy is talking about some logical argument that he has as to why he doesn't like whoever, but it's clearly about some other grudge from a ways back. I've seen a few guys who have some, like, behind-the-scenes problems with some other guy behind the scenes, but then they make up this totally random logical argument that has nothing to do with it, and you kind of... And there's more subtext. Everybody kind of knows what's going on, but nobody says anything. So I find even if you try to be overt and miss any subtext, you end up building a second layer of subtext anyway. But I find that second layer of subtext is always cruder, more destructive, and less beneficial for anybody.
Well, I think that's just because a lot of guys who do this are probably the guys who aren't good with that type of subtle disagreement. And, I have a lot of guys, I talk to a lot of different spaces within the manosphere, and I know you do as well. And, my thing is, you can have honest discussions about specific people and your real opinion of them, but you have those in DMs or in private chats or, Skype or whatever, when you don't do that in public, because that's not a good look. And it's not to give off the impression that, the red pill is a cult, because, well, I hope they have we have shitty Kool-Aid if that's the case. But the whole thing with it is, it's about, given the impression that, we agree on 90% of things, and then we disagree on the last 10. Like, one of my big issues, and the reason why I get into it regularly with the TradCon element, is it's not that we fundamentally disagree on the analysis of the world, it's that we disagree with the prescription.
Oh, yeah,
so
same.
In my case, I agree with TradCons on their entire analysis. We share the analysis, but I just think we need to take that knowledge, we need to give it to guys, and they can figure the rest out for themselves. We don't need to tell them, well, you need to find God, go into a Polish village that doesn't have the internet and, find a nice virgin, have like 8 kids and live in the forest chopping wood and smoking your pipe. No, fuck that shit. Just figure out what you want to do with it and just do that.
Do you know who's great for that? This is going to be like a positive call out. Hi, Siv. Remember him? He's a lawyer out of Chicago. Yeah, he's on both of our Twitters. I love that guy. He's hardcore Catholic, traditional conservative. He's technically everything you just said that you don't agree with, but awesome source of knowledge, great guy to talk to, and he gets it, is the best part. And I would really be worried about guys who end up just, because I see him getting into fights all the time with red pill guys, and his thing is law. So if I want to learn about law, I'm going to talk to a lawyer that deals with family courts, and he's great for it. And at the end of the day, he also understands, and I understand too. We're focused in the same direction. You want a bunch of self-actualized men who have their crap together, and generally have the world, either the world as a better place or you as a better person within whatever clown world you're in. And so we disagree on like Jesus and a couple other small details, but it's not worth losing out on a wealth of knowledge on both sides just to make somebody else validate your feelings by joining your herd and thinking. I find that weird. It's a feminine way of thinking too. I find some of our most unattractive attitudes when it comes to this stuff. We say spurg, but if you think about it, it's essentially effeminate. When you want everybody to think what you think and you're shaming people for not doing so, that's exactly what the mother hen thinks. If you guys don't know, the mother hen is the older, unattractive girl in a set that basically polices the other girls. And I'm wondering, yeah, and it reminds me of that Chuck Palahniuk line about is another woman really the answer to our problems? And I keep coming back to that.
No, I agree with you, and it's just one of those things that I tend to think, there are guys I disagree with on certain parts, like there are guys who are into, numerology and mysticism and all that shit, and I might disagree with them on that. That doesn't mean that they're not a great source of knowledge on what they actually know. So I just like to be able to maintain those relationships. And I also don't feel the need, like, I hate the pylons because I think they're fundamentally, let's say, they're feminine and they're unprofessional. Because if you go out, you make a public call out of someone, and you try to get a gang of guys together to go after this one dude, I find that just deal with him like a man and deal with him directly. Like, if you have beef with someone, talk to them. Don't talk to everyone else to get a gang together and then call them out publicly. Just deal with it like a man.
And I get it. Like, I've been on a few myself before. I remember it was actually, you called it out once, like about a month or two, 3 months ago, maybe. And I kind of realized it. Like, they're very deceptively easy to fall into because you generally like a guy. And if a guy has a trouble with something, you want to help him out because that's what guys naturally want to do. I help my buddies. I got their backs. And so it's very easy to fall in that trap. So I don't mean to, and I don't want readers here to take this to mean like it's a failing. It's something that we're naturally predisposed to that you kind of have to actively suppress for the sake of improving yourself.
And in some areas, sometimes it's like if you're in a bar with a couple of buddies and they get into a fight, of course you're going to get in there and have their backs in that fight.
Yeah, and at the same time, you give your buddies the reasonable expectation that you're not going out to pick fights just because I have your back.
Yeah, exactly. Like, everyone has that one buddy who just has to pick a fucking fight. Like, the guy could go to like a fucking ashram or some shit in India with a bunch of Buddhist monks, and the guy would get in a fight. And what happens is you have his back like twice, and then you're like, I can't go out with you anymore. I just can't pay these medical bills. It's getting too fucking expensive to hang with you. It's cutting into my drinking money.
Well, I had a friend like that. I'm raised hardcore redneck, and I remember this. After a while, we kind of caught what was on, and to the one guy that he was micking on, the guy kind of looks back and sees all of us there staring at him, and we're like, and I kind of just went like, look, man, once you knock him down, then just leave it there, and we're cool. And it's funny because it sobered the guy up. He just realized, oh shit, this guy's really just gonna let him punch me in the face, and then he kind of started walking back. I don't know why I was thinking of that now. It just made me laugh.
And, you know, I hate the same thing in corporate because a lot of the time what you have there is you have people who they work behind the scenes to get a lot of people together behind something. And that's part of that's what you do in a lot of, when you start to get into the higher echelons of corporate, when you want to get something done, you kind of have to get the sign off from multiple people it's called stakeholder management in corporate terms.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of what you do. And a lot of the time that's going to be open and overt in meetings, and you're going to have project proposals. And a lot of the time that's going to be covert. Like, you ask, hey, let's go grab a coffee, and you talk to them and you kind of do a back channel thing to make sure you have their support before they get the official thing.
I would say most of the time it's covert. I found setting up your project meetings is like almost a formality at that point. Like, it's something you have to do because that's proper corporate governance. But yeah, most of the time, the back meetings, the quick chats in the office, the walk to the water cooler type stuff, that's where, at least for me, that was where most of the work got done.
Yeah, well, that's the case. And, you know, you have to do all the formal stuff. But most of the time, people have signed off on it way before you do the formal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's corporate. That's the way you do it there. But I don't like to do it that way in my private life. Like, I don't see the need to kind of, okay, we have to discuss behind the scenes how we're handling this, unless it's something like, if you have a reporter who's doing a huge expose on the manager, like if we found out that one of the guys that we've been working closely with is really a reporter for the New York Times and some shit, is doing like a 7-piece editorial, you know, inside the red pill.
Damn it, Hunter.
At some point, we may have to sit down and get on a chat and be like, okay, how are we going to respond to this based on what they're publishing?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just good risk management right there.
Oh, agreed. And let's face it, if you're going to be anonymous or non-anonymous in the red pill space, you kind of have to. Like, even Delicious Tacos has to have some level of that. I remember he had some time with Richard Spencer back in the day before he started writing, so I don't think you're ever going to avoid it. But even with friends, though, if you're just talking about small stuff, you still do it. You just do it on a much more informal and a quicker, more fast-paced level. As opposed to sitting down and having all these backdoor meetings. Just kind of have a chat with your buddies. Like, yeah, we cool on this? Yeah, we're cool. And it's usually settled. Because it's more often than not just a small thing.
Yeah, but most of the time I don't want it to come off as cultish, because I think that's the accusation that we get levied at us a lot of the time. And part of that is just that a lot of the theory is just really, really well ironed out at this point. Like hypergamy, Rollo did the conceptualization of it. I went and I dug up all the stats that actually showed that, okay, this is what happens on OkCupid, this is what happens on Tinder, and that confirms Rollo's theory, which was kind of the goal of gendernomics to begin with.
Oh, I got such a good woman. She built me a bookshelf and she's making me coffee.
Yeah, surprised she's not made you a closet for your Hawaiian shirts.
What do you think this is going to be in a couple weeks?
It's just the shirt space.
Yeah. Anyways, I cut you off. You actually had a pretty good point there, and I want to hear the end of it.
Yeah, what was I talking about before you rudely cut me off?
Oh, I wish I could
call out W on Twitter now.
Oh, Rollo did conceptual. You tied it down to incentives and scientific source, like give it credibility. I think I know where you were going with this, though. So
yeah, and that theory, I mean, sure, there are a lot of areas where we could use solid academic work, you know, proper quantitative and qualitative research of a certain standard, because a lot of what Rollo does is extrapolation.
Yeah.
Because you have a starting point that the data and the theory from the evolutionary psychology and biology leads you to. Then you extrapolate that into a principle, and then you kind of apply that generally across a large space. And normally when you do that in proper research, like the census is probably your best source of that type of data, because that's everyone in the country. So like if you have like every guy when they turn 18, if you measure their height, then you have like a perfect measurement, and you can say exactly, okay, this is the average height. This is kind of the top end outliers. These are the short fuckers, and so on. So you can just generally say that, you know, an average man is this tall. And same thing with what Rollo did. It's just he extrapolated that, and you know, you're applying something that's essentially a grounded theory form of research, and which should really go through like a large quantitative data collection.
Which it kind of does. We do that through field reports, and that's kind of where I came from, was that side of things. Everybody tries this stuff, talks about what works, and don't talk about what doesn't work, and it kind of goes by the wayside. It's not as formal and as accurate as it could be. You are right with a lot of the qual and quan stuff if you do it properly. But I find that, at least from my perspective, a lot of guys have tried it. Every time you hear a story back about it working, it works. If it doesn't work, the guy sometimes leaves in a hideous rant, but like you get an idea, and then you understand its nuance, where hypergamy is girls moving up and out. If you're her best option, she falls in love with you. And then guys assume that. You get the spurred guys that assume that means the instant you gain 5 pounds, she's going to go suck Chad off the next day. But then you get some guys who are like, no, that's not what I'm seeing at all. And then they try and think, can it work within this framework? And then they kind of realize that her bitchiness is tied to how much you've slacked recently. And you realize that everything here is not so black and white, and everything's got like a little caveat or an asterisk to it. And I do like that part of it. I don't know if Quan could help it. And here's another point. I'll leave this one to you as a statement question. But obviously, a lot of guys have huge distrust for large institutions. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Let's face it. In Canada, we just lost StatsCan, which was our pride and joy. We had a statistics government agency that was like the world standard. Harper shut it down. In the States, so many people are distrusting of the government that any authoritative studies are basically not trusted by men, and you can't blame them. The APA was supposed to be an authoritative institution, and they're telling you that having a dick makes you psychologically malaligned. And so I don't know if that level of credibility is achievable, because the institutions that would do it haven't given the requisite level of they haven't handled their social responsibility, I guess. I'm curious what you think on that one.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's what happens, and that's why that's kind of the same reason why I think, for a large part, academia should have stayed out from partisan politics, and it's the same reason why I think the red pill should stay the fuck away from partisan politics.
Oh God, yeah.
Because once you get involved in that, you end up tainting what you're producing. Like, if you're producing research that it is clearly done to advance a given political position or to placate a given political group,
right,
then people lose trust in your institution. And that's kind of why like something like StatsCan or the British equivalent, or I think America even has an equivalent to it, U.S. Census Bureau.
Yeah,
But,
Facebook.
And Facebook, NSA. But no, but so what I was getting at is just that when you lose that level of trust, then you just can't do what you're supposed to do. And at that point, you lose out because you, as a society, actually lose an objective source that helps everyone be at a point of, okay, we disagree on this, but at least we agree on the starting premise. Like I had a discussion with a guy who was kind of disagreeing with my position of spin plates for 5 years before you get married.
Right.
And we went back and forth a couple of times, and he's like, "You just stopped responding," and I was like, "No, because you can't argue anything else." No, I stopped because we're just coming from two distinct viewpoints that we're never going to be able to reconcile, and we can go on here forever, and there's no point in it. Because if your thing is like everyone should remain a virgin until they're married and only have one sex partner, and my view is, spin plates for 5 years, notch count isn't really all that important unless it's extreme, etc. Like even the research supports that you don't want to marry a virgin. I mean, the longest lasting marriages are where the woman has between 3 and 7 partners.
Oh, really?
So it's not the virgin thing. I do get the whole idea, because if you take the whole alpha widow thing, the odds of the girl being alpha widowed is much higher if she has a notch count of 47 as opposed to 4.7.
Yeah.
4.7 that, she slept with 4 guys, she gave 1 guy a blowjob, and she jerked a guy off once.
That whore. A handy. What are they thinking? Well, I was thinking too, that's like a choice, was it choice paralysis, or am I getting the phenomenon wrong, where the more choices you have or the more options you have, the less likely you are to actually pick one? And so for a girl that's had 50, 60, 70 dicks, the odds, and plus the odds of you being the best one out of them in her eyes, are decreased substantially. Obviously, a girl who's only slept with one guy, you got a 50-50 shot of outdoing them. Although that doesn't really matter anyway, I guess, because girls, like, mentally, they rewrite the script in their head. So if they love you right now, you're the best ever. It's when you break up that, Chad was better.
Yeah, well, it's like Illimitable Man had a great statement at one point. It's like, if a girl loves you, she'll rationalize an extra 3 inches onto your dick.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that. I sailed with a girl who was like that. Every time she had a new serial monogamy boyfriend, every month, new boyfriend, his dick is huge. We called him Hammers. His hammer's fucking huge. As soon as they broke up, I was just a little hammered motherfucker anyway, and like clockwork.
Yeah, and it's I get back to something I heard about, some guy talking about the Instagram fitness models, the male ones, and he was kind of explaining, why they're not exactly the best role models, and he's like, first off, they're the guys who started weight training real early. So they got the benefit of lifting heavy when they're going through that roided period when you're a teenage boy, and you're at the testosterone level is like 1200.
Right.
Secondly, they're the guys who've stuck with it for 10, 15 years. 3, they're the guys who are the most disciplined. They're the guys who are on point with their diet. They don't miss workouts. They are really focused, and they build their life around it. They're also the guys who are the top 1% in terms of genetics. They're also going to be the guys who are doing roids, but not just the guys who are doing roids. They're also the top 1% of people who respond well to taking steroids. So at that point, they're a part of so many 1% groups that their probability of being in that group is basically 0. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you're better off just... Jesus, you're smoking weed again, Stone?
Smoke alarm. It happens.
Okay, I'll just answer the question. Does it matter how you greet a woman? Like, is there any difference between hi, hey, what's up, etc.? Context? Is that work, or if she's a friend of a friend? Well, I know from some research I did that on OkCupid, hi had a much lower response rate than hey. But I just had to, it's one of those details. Like, it's not a detail that's of great importance in the sense that, she's going to file a sexual harassment suit against you if you say, hey. But just think, what's the context? And like, if you're doing something like a corporate get together, where it's an informal context, then you can use more informal greetings. If you're in a corporate context, you want to use a more formal greeting. It's the same thing as with clothes. Like, try and adapt to your setting and your context. Like, you don't want to be the fucker with a suit on at the beach. And you don't want to be the guy who shows up to a wedding wearing a Hawaiian shirt, though I'm pretty sure Ryan did that at one point or another.
Dude, these ones are obvious. Come up with some new material.
Yeah, I know. Get some new shirts.
Oh, apologies. The dog's going to be in on this one. As soon as the fire alarm goes off, he just freaks out and jumps on my lap and shivers. So,
oh, it's no problem. It's a really masculine dog. It matches your shirts. But anyway, where I was getting at, you just have to think context. So in anything you do, think, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? Who am I meeting? And what am I doing? And what is the core purpose of being there? Because if you're overdressed, that doesn't work. If you're underdressed, that doesn't work. If you're too formal with your greeting, you get less rapport. If you're too informal, you appear less professional. Like, if you walk into a corporate meeting in a boardroom and you go, yo, motherfucker, you're not going to be taken seriously in that meeting. Most of the guys are going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? Unless, like, it's the shareholders meeting at Fubu or some shit. So you just have to think context and situation. And the best thing I can say is be adaptable. I mean, you can play a lot with your image. And I find that most of the guys who are really kind of locked into their image, they're either really inflexible guys or they're guys who have kind of been allowed to call the shots all their life, so they never had to kind of adapt to someone else's context. Like, if you've ran your own company your whole life and you've never had a boss, and the last time you had to kind of follow someone else's instruction was in high school and you're in your late 30s now, you're going to often be a hard guy to work with. Because you're not used to having to
play nice with others.
You're not used to negotiating frame, and that was kind of the content of the big content I did. And good thing the smoke alarm's off. I can stop rambling.
That's all right. I'm going to carry on this one too.
No, the whole thing with the context of my frame thread was frame is two things. It's strength. It's knowing what are my values. What am I trying to get out of this shit? What are my boundaries? What's the least I'm willing to take? What's the most I'm willing to take, etc. And how hard you stick with those. And the second thing is persuasion, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a girl or a business partner or a potential cooperating partner or whatever to kind of see the world in your way. And in order to do that, you have to make your frame more attractive than the frame they're currently in.
Yeah, appeal to his best interests.
And that's why amogging the only reason why people invented amogging was because guys were entering sets that already had kind of an alpha male in them and who was trying to cock block them. And they had to come up with tactics for managing that alpha male in the same way you need a tactic to manage the mother hen or, the other potential cock blocks within a set. And the whole point of amogging is to subtly display higher value than their current alpha male, get everyone to adopt your frame instead of his without having to actually fight the motherfucker. And that's kind of the important bit of it. You don't want to fight him because fighting is a high risk proposition.
Not just that, it's a DLV. Girls, they may be attracted to violence, but if you start a fight in front of them, that's going to dry them out real quick.
Yeah, the other guy might get their sympathy, and so he might actually be the guy. If he's trying to de-escalate and you're escalating, you're showing that I have no emotional control whatsoever.
Yeah, the whole thing, like, it's come on, dogs. I was gonna say too on his question where he was talking about the how to say hi and is there a better way. I don't even find, like, obviously for professional settings you want to have a common business acumen, but in an interpersonal one, it doesn't even matter so much what you say as the subtext and the body language of how you say it. So, for example, I keep using this one example. I'd always go down to the Starbucks by my work. That's where I would spend most of my time writing blogs and that. And here, one sec, I got to kick this dog out. So I would just walk up to a girl and make fun of her drink. When those pink unicorn drinks came out, it was great because it was like an awesome opener. All I had to do was just make fun of this pink drink. I'd call it like liquid diabetes or something. But then you would walk up, and it's not me just sitting there with a furrowed brow and that. It's me with a big shit-eating grin on my face, kind of positive body language, like I'm just teasing somebody politely. Dressed in a suit, so obviously I'm supposed to be there. I'm not some Chad running game, and it made it easy to approach at that point. But in any other setting, you probably wouldn't get away with it. But I could have said 100 different things that were probably more socially acceptable, but he just kind of carried it through with the body language, and it worked out well. So I don't even think, what you say matters so much as how you say it, at least from that perspective.
No, and who you are, especially for game. Because, and there was actually some research that was kind of funny that it showed that people who talk a lot in meetings are viewed as more intelligent, no matter what they say. And they're also viewed as higher social status.
Interesting. I didn't know about that one. I knew about it from a marketing standpoint, like when Gillette was saying all those men are trash commercials. I just knew in 15 minutes people are going to forget about those, and all they're going to do is when they're at the razor aisle, they'll see Gillette and it'll click in their head that they remember the logo.
What's going on? Is your wife done with your lunch?
No, the concierge is giving an announcement, and the dogs, every time his fire alarm goes off, he freaks out because here's a funny story for you. Every time the wife would make something to eat, she would always cook peppers in the frying pan. The problem with peppers in the frying pan is they turn your house into tear gas. And so the dog got absolutely terrified whenever he'd hear like a ceiling fan from the stove or the fire alarm because somebody was burning something. And so he's just learned to associate that noise with absolute panic.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Small little story. There, Hitchens, say hi. Yeah, he doesn't care.
No, some dude here is like, click on the show. First thing I hear is Carl advising to fight someone. No, I was saying not to fucking fight someone.
Hey, how do you like it? There's your shirts. Carl, the shit stirrer.
It's generally, like, I'm a consummate shit stirrer, but I hardly ever get into fights just for the reason that there's very few reasons where you get a good outcome from fighting someone. Same thing with beef. Like, the only people who earn a lot of money off beef are butchers, burger restaurants, and rappers. So you kind of just want to... Same thing with, like, when you have an alpha male in a group, just to do the pickup thing fully out, but you have two options. You can either dethrone him or you can work with him and get a wingman out of it. And it's much better if you work with him and, because he's not going to want to fuck all the girls he's with, but he might have his eye on one of them. If you can figure out who he's trying to bang and help him with that, then he's probably going to help you bang one of the other ones. And that way you get a potential wingman, so you get something more out of the situation rather than make a potential enemy and potentially alienate an entire fucking set.
Dude, you just described my life. In college, military, all of it was the exact same thing. College, I had a guy. He was like 6'2", gorgeous, half East Indian guy. And he got all the 8s, 9s, and 10s. But they always had wingmen with them or girlfriends with them that were, 5s or 6s, and that was always fine. At the very least, just putting him in a room like you're putting two monkeys in a cage hoping they have sex. It worked out great. Same thing with the military. I had Chad buddy, rugby player, scar on his face, 6'3", awesome guy there. Same thing. The hottest girl or the most boisterous girl of the group always went after him, but there was always at least two other ones in the group that you had plenty of opportunity for. It's like the perfect force amplifier is to have a Chad as a best friend.
And I think that's a perfect transition to the blue ocean topic, because my example on that, and I'll start with the example just because I want to take a pot shot at Indian dudes. But you get the whole thing with kind of the Indian dudes who complain I can't get any girl. And, it's always the same girl they're going after, like the blonde California surfer girl type.
With Bob's and Jean.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that's wading into a red ocean. And to give kind of the intro to Blue Ocean Strategy, it's a book that came out years ago. And what it deals with is what markets should you go into? And the Blue Ocean Strategy is find a market niche where there's little competition and where you have an underserved market. Because you can go out and you can go after a big market that's already being served by 50 different companies, and you're going to have a hell of a lot of competition because that's a red ocean.
Right.
But if you like if you do something special, like okay, you do a hair pomade for quarter black guys who have kind of the black guy hair, but not quite, and not quite the white guy hair either. So you're kind of specifically catering to that market. You're going to be able to satisfy their needs much better than a general company. And it's probably not going to be profitable for a huge company to do something for a market that small, but the market size is still large enough that you can make a very good income from serving that market. Like if you have 100,000 guys who will all buy your product, twice a year and spend $100 on it, you have a pretty decent revenue stream for a small scale company. Do that in 15 markets and you have a huge company built on essentially exploiting niches where you have little competition. And the reason why I was discussing that with John the other day was just the fact that a lot of the guys, when they get into game, they wade into the red ocean and they try to compete for the same girls that 99% of other guys are competing for. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, okay, what girls are easier for me to get? Because you're a red pill women thing. They had a valid point that, you're going to have a type of girl you're attracted to. And it's usually based on what kind of girl you've been able to attract in the past.
Right. So to get what you want as opposed to wanting or what you get.
Yeah, so use that as a jumping off point. Like if only fat goth girls have been into you and you've gotten in better shape, improved your dress, maybe, you can get thin goth girls now. Or hotter goth girls, and just focus on cultivating those niches where you can, where you have a competitive advantage. Ryan's concierge is saying that all his shirts burned off. Your mic is muted.
For a sec. Oh wait, am I on or am I off now? Here, I'm just gonna.
Now you're on.
There we go. Apologies for that one. Yeah, I was thinking because that used to be my niche when I was running night game. There was 2 bars I used to go to because there was the main bar in Victoria. It's on Wharf Street. That's where all the bars are. The big one was called Upstairs Cabaret. A bunch of sailors used to work there as bouncers. They loved them because they showed up to work on time and didn't do coke. So it was like the best employee you could have for moonlighting. But then right across the street, down some stairs, there was this place called the Boom Boom Room. And it was a complete dive club. And usually most of the people there, and Victoria, if you don't know, is a fairly ethnically homogenous British style town, if you can read between the lines what I'm saying there. So this is where all the other people would go. And you would find it there. And just down the street at this bar was called Evolutions, which was a goth bar. And so our system was to go from the one at the beginning of the night and then stop at the end one at the later part of the night. And it would be weird. It's like a spotlight would show up. You see all these thug people sitting in the club. And then you would see 4 white girls wearing Lululemons. And you realize those are the ones that are there to avoid shame from their peer group. And so it was like a nice, perfect little niche. If there was tons of guys going there, they'd end up being fighting over them, and it would totally be counterproductive. But once you got there, it was a nice, I guess, blue ocean is what you called it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be a perfect little blue ocean because they were there to have some fun away from the prying eyes of their friends. You were also the safer choice because you resembled the kind of guys that she's used to being around, but you guys are in a totally different venue. It was like isolation happened for you just by your logistics. Yeah, if I think I'm catching on to your topic right, I think I missed some of the nuance with it.
No, you're on point with your analogy because that's exactly what a blue ocean is. And it's the same thing with my niche. My niche is usually well-educated professional women to some extent because they're not at the point where they're going to go full-on dumpster diving and just go for the rock star Chad. Mm-hmm. A lot of them want the air of respectability, even though that's not really what they're after. And, they like the idea of being able to tell themselves that, okay, yeah, I could actually be in a relationship with this guy rather than it being just, for sex. And, me being me, that works well for me because I'm kind of the guy, I'm not going to boyfriend up any of them, but I'm the kind of guy they would want to boyfriend them up at some point.
You meet both needs, the plausible deniability and the tingles.
Yeah, so that's just a good niche that I've kind of found myself. And a lot of the time, your choices will define your niche for you. And a lot of the time when guys are like, I can't find any girls to fuck, it's because they've defined the girls they want to fuck as being far away from their niche. It's like if you do a Venn diagram of the girls they want to fuck and one circle with the girls they want to fuck and one circle with the girls they're actually able to fuck, it's like two completely different circles on both sides of a freeway. They either have to massively step up their game to be able to compete in the market and adapt to that level, or they're going to have to review who they're going after. Because, it's just if you're shooting way over your league, for instance, you're not going to be able to get laid ever.
I agree. And that chasm to get from A to B, most guys are not willing to put that level of self-improvement. I find that's where all those MGTOW arguments start coming out. Like, you can tell when a guy is aimed too high and refuses to come to meet the challenge, because that's when he starts saying the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And I guarantee it's one of those things. They don't actually believe that. They know, like, innately, we have the need to put our dicks into girls. That's fine. It's natural. But then once they start saying that it's not worth it anymore, you can tell that's an ego defense.
Yeah, they don't want to lower their standards, but they're also not willing to put in the work to bang hotter girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this before. Like I could be more muscular, more ripped, for instance, or something like that. But that would require kind of a lot of work, and that would take away from other things that I enjoy doing. Like, if I have to not drink for like 4 months to get ripped, fuck that. I'll bang a girl who's a 7 instead of an 8. It's not about the juice not being worth the squeeze. It's about me not being willing to put in that level of work for that little of an improvement. Your mic is muted again.
Yeah, trade-offs. Totally it. And I get that too. That's why, and honestly, even if it's not true, my analogy of girls only being 4s, 5s, and 6s, I think is perfect there, because then it prevents you from setting your standards overly high. Because you're just looking for the threshold. Is it good enough? And then at that point, you start, and you can play it on the field once you realize you're talking to this girl and more hassle, more hassle, more hassle. And at some point, you're like, you know what? Screw it. But you're also not setting those standards so high that you're doing that, this is too much hassle right at the start before you even put in a little bit of effort.
And it's also the same, like I got into it with a couple of the day game guys about day game versus online game. And I don't think those are adversarial. I get that, yes, you can get hotter girls in day game. Because if you're on Tinder, it's basically how good are your pictures? What mood is she in? How did the last 2 guys she swiped on look? And how good is your bio to some extent? Like if she's kind of in between, should I swipe left or right?
Oh yeah, a bunch of it's outside of your control.
Yeah, in day game, you can kind of use the full, because it's not just your look, it's your body language, it's your voice tone, it's your level of game, it's your charm, etc. All that comes into play. And if you're like, let's say you have bad pictures and you're a 6, but you look like a 5 because your pictures suck, you're going to be digging in the bottom of the barrel of Tinder. If you're like around 7 or 8, but your pictures make you look like a 10, you're going to be in the top niche, and you're going to get a lot of good prospects.
I was going to say, or you're fat fishing girls or cat fishing them. What's the guy's version? Dog fishing?
I have no clue. Never heard of a guy version, actually.
I'm just wondering about that. Yeah, if a guy is like a 6 out of 10, but his photos make him look like an 8, and a girl meets him in real life, is that going to have the same visceral reaction that a guy will when he's catfished?
I don't think so, because a lot of the time with, I like to use the term fat fishing instead of catfishing.
Yeah, because cats are cool?
No, but because I hate cats.
My brother has a cat. Drives me nuts.
But the point of it is, just with fat fishing, it's just about a girl looking a hell of a lot better. And it's like, a lot of the time there, it's like, okay, girl has a pretty face. And, she's one of those girls that just doesn't put any fat on her face. So she still has a nice face despite being kind of heavy. It's like Ashley Graham. Do you know who she is?
Yeah. But I know the phenomenon too. Yeah, the one where the fat goes everywhere but the face. Or those girls that it goes into the boobs first, so they can carry a fair chunk of weight, and you won't notice it first because you're busy staring at the cleavage. Very deceptive fat collection mechanisms.
But the point I was getting at is just the girl doesn't look fat, so you match with her, and then she shows up and she's fat. And I'm not talking, normal, North America, what you'd call average in North America, which is like BMI 487. But I mean, like she's past curvy like 40 pounds ago.
At the point where you'd feel embarrassed about it if your friends caught you.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing. It's like you're okay with sleeping with her if it's a slump buster or something, but you're not going to tell anyone that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as when, the girl brings home like a good professional lawyer girl or something that's a partner at her law firm, and she's like 32, and she takes home a guy who's like 22 years old. He's a rock star and he's tatted up and has gang affiliation. She's not going to tell anyone that she fucked him.
Oh yeah, he doesn't get into the notch count census.
So it's the same thing there, but to get a little bit back on topic with Blue Oceans, it's just about finding, okay, what girls can I get? What is my competitive advantage? Like, what are things about you that are unique, a unique configuration of skills, abilities, talents, innate and learned, that makes you better at getting a certain type of girl? And it's kind of like finding the right spot where you have girls you can get and who are looking for the unique thing you present to them.
I would approach it slightly different, only because that's how I approached it in my life. The be like me, it worked for me approach is that a lot of guys aren't going to have that type of self-awareness. So I would just say, in the meantime, to be able to get outside of your comfort zone and try a bunch of new things until you find one that works. Because I didn't know about any of that my niche. I didn't know about it until I had tried 4, 5, 6 different other niches, and that was the one that just happened to stick. So if you're not the kind of guy who's able to accurately assess what your niches are or what your failings are, what your strengths are, then it might be better if you just throw spaghetti at as many different walls as you can and then stick around for the one that sticks.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good way of going about it. And it's one of those, one of the things I got from David D'Angelo back in the day. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the guy.
Familiar, but I haven't read his stuff.
No, he had a good point in one of his seminars that I illegally pirated back in the day. And, well, they were charging like 21 comp prices for videotapes. Fuck that shit.
Just for the tape?
Yeah, it was expensive as fuck. It was like $700 for the full-time tape library, if I remember correctly.
Jeez. Hey, and funny thing about... Oh, sorry, tell your story first. I'm just rambling.
And what I was getting at with that is he made a point out of saying, like, think about what kind of girl you're attracted to. Like, if you're into, like, the kind of highbrow literary girl or whatever, where would that girl be? She's probably not going to be at the dance club, but she's probably going to be at a bookstore or at the library or, around a college. So go there and run game instead of going to the clubs hoping to meet that girl, because the clubs at that point, that was the easy way where everyone went to run game. Because you had a ton of targets there, but you also had very high competition. So the club was a red ocean. Ton of guys all there to find pussy. Usually, not a lot of girls to go around. The girls have constant guys hitting on them. So if you go somewhere else, like go to a bookstore or whatever, and that's more or less how Day Game was born, because a bunch of guys were like, the clubs, it's too much competition. I don't get to show it. Like, if you're a good conversationalist, you're not going to be able to show that off in a club.
See, that's funny. I got a counter story to that one too. It was the same thing. I guess I found a blue ocean inside of a red ocean. What I would do is, I would these guys are freaking out. It's really ruining my professionalism here. I'm not happy about that. So I would go to the bar, but the bars are loud. You can't really have a conversation. So I would always go to the smoking lounge, and that was my little niche area there. Because there you could actually have a conversation. You're somewhat outside. You have a cigarette, so there's that plausible deniability as to why you're approaching each other, because, I didn't even smoke. I just had a cigarette. I'd leave it in my ear and start running my mouth as if I forgot that I was out there to smoke because I was having so much fun. She had a way to approach if she wanted to, but it kind of made my own blue ocean within a red ocean, I guess is the best way to say it. Because then I could play to my strength, which was running my mouth and acting a little dickish with a big smile on my face. Although I know some bars in Europe you can actually smoke inside, so I don't know if that's as useful.
Well, it's always useful to think in terms of, okay, what is everyone else doing and what can we do differently? Because like it was the conversation Tate and John were having too. Like there's always going to be some guy who's more alpha, more chatty, and more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be a guy who's stronger. There's always going to be a guy who's richer. So you have to kind of figure out, how do you leverage what's your strength? Like if you're competing against a guy who's 4 inches taller than you and ripped to the gills, what can you do that he can't do? Because he's outbodying you. How can you outcompete him within a given niche?
It's funny how a lot of guys go to money as their answer to that one too, which is a horrible. It's a comfort building beta type behavior. So I would say at least have, and that's why I love Rolo's conceptual stuff, because then it at least, like, how do you compete with him for your goal? If you wanted to get a girlfriend, obviously you might want to compete saying I have a steady job in that. If you just wanted a one-day lay, you would compete on the alpha behavior sets. So it's like, I can't do body, but maybe I can develop tingles, emotional engagement, or maybe I can do situational alpha. Like I'm the DJ at the party, even though I'm the fat guy at the party.
So it's like I can play to humor because that's one of my strengths, humor and quick wit. So I know that most guys are not going to be as funny or as quick witted as I am. So I can play to that because especially when you start getting into some, like when girls start getting a little bit older and not like into their 40s, but like let's say 25 and up, they kind of start to look for, they're not just hooked on the hot body anymore. Other things start to factor into it. So you're going to have your, not just your appearance, but if you're over that, you have to be this tall for me to ride you thing, where you're not horrible in any area. And then you can focus on, okay, how's your humor? How's your ability to engage her emotionally? How good are you with not stepping on your own dick? How good are you with logistics, just getting her to do what you want? How good are you with showing that your frame is actually better than the hot guy's frame? Because her default is going for the hot guy's frame because that's the easy choice. But how can you persuade her that your frame is the better one to get into? And that's kind of a hard sell in a lot of situations, which is also why I advocate, identifying your own blue oceans. And then once you have a blue ocean or two or three, then you can start to expand on that. You can enter into some new markets that may be more competition there, but at that point, you're secure enough in yourself and your frame that you actually have a real chance at success. Because the worst thing you can do if you're totally fresh to this is to jump into the most competitive spaces there are. Because most of the guys who find the red pill and find game, they're, I estimate, between 5 and 10 years behind their peers in terms of social development. And I don't mean to say that as in, you're disabled or, let's say, there's the bundle of sticks thing, but I can't find a good enough reference for having an IQ lower than 100. So what you want to think about is, how will you frame your competition in a negative light so that you look better? That's not a good approach because you're basically trying to AMOG your way in. But what you're doing instead is you're eliminating the competition by specifically seeking out places where they're not. Then once you're good at that and you caught up to them in terms of development, so that you're not the guy with 16-year-old game skills competing with guys who have 26-year-old game skills, you're the guy with 30-year-old game skills, not in terms of age, but you practiced so much that you actually caught up and surpassed your competition. And that's easy to do because even like the high-end alphas do not approach nearly as much as, a guy who's running active game. Like I saw Troy Francis now. He did something like 100 approaches a month for January, February, March, and April, and is on his way to do 100 for May. I've done between 10 and 30 dates a month for the past 5 months, including, day game approaches, online approaches, etc. So I get a fuck ton of practice at dealing with new girls all the time. So
Hey,
when you build up that practice, you've caught up and you surpass the guys who are better than you to begin with.
hey, I was gonna say too. I remember you were saying your New Year's resolution this year was one per week. How are you? Are you on target, or how you doing? Above, below, about right?
No, I'm way below target, so I need to dial up my game. It was just I got kind of knocked off because I had a lot of shit going on in my professional life, and I have like this time management strategy where, whatever makes me money is priority number one. So, whatever maintains my lifestyle and keeps everything on track there. And once that's handled, I get into things like lifting, running game, watching diet, etc. Because if you're about to lose your job, the least thing you should do is go home early because you need to hit the gym.
It's true. Occasionally, you do have to step up and handle emergencies as they happen.
So I will have to dial up going forward once I have everything settled and calmed down. Like last week when I dropped the gendernomics books, I was editing 2 books. I was handling some business things on my own end. Plus, I was dealing with a full-time job at a new project. So I was just hammered all week, and I'm also trying to be kind of diligent about my gym time. So, and getting enough sleep. So I just don't have the time for it. And it's not really an excuse, but sometimes you have just things in your life that are more important than bagging chicks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to have to step my game up going forward to catch up.
Totally understandable. Plus, you had a fairly big move, so from random place number 1 to random place number 2, and that's not exactly an easy thing to slip into the schedule.
No, exactly. You kind of have to dial in. Yes, there will be physical copies of Gendernomics, but Ryan was reorganizing his shirt closet, so we don't have the covers yet.
Yeah, covers will be happening shortly. Any delays on it, you guys can leave that on my doorstep. You can AMOG me in the chat.
Yeah, and the good thing about that is that it's totally not on me for still working on the manuscript.
Fair enough. At least yours is out. Mine's still in like a draft state, and it's kind of embarrassing. Although I guess I can see why you and Rollo always laugh when everybody talks about books, because it's a lot of work. Like, not so much a lot of work because you have all the ideas, but being able to put them into a coherent narrative and then make it readable to the point where somebody's willing to sit down for 10 hours and go through it. It's
feedback. Like, I think this analogy was stretched, or this model was forced, or you missed page numbers on this page. And, you still get those feedbacks, but you can fix that as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of my things, the reason why there's like hardly any graphs in Gendernomics 2 compared to Gendernomics 1 is just because Amazon is an absolute cunt to work with when it comes to graphics.
Really?
Yeah, you can see it now in the in Gendernomics on like I line everything up perfectly in Word, exactly the way I want it. And you run it through the Amazon Kindle converter and it moves images around and, it moves the caption text and everything. So I've just kind of learned to live with the fact that at some places in Gendernomics, you get like half a page of text and then you get 2 graphs on the next page. And then you get the other half of the text. You just have to kind of live with that and try and fix it as you go along, because no matter how much work you put into it, Amazon fucks it up.
Oh, that's too bad, because that's something I used to love about old books, is where they'd have wood etchings like randomly dispersed through there as like an illustration. I love the aesthetic on it. And now that I know that that's most likely not going to work with Amazon, it's kind of a little off-putting. Although typical me, I always like putting pretty pictures on things. Typical wannabe artist, right?
Well, it works well with the printed books, but not so much with the digital, because what happens there is they kind of standardize it, because guys are going to be reading this on desktops, laptops, Kindle devices, other tablets. They're going to have different print sizes and so on. So it's impossible to make one that work.
Well, that's good to know. Well, you just got to plow through. I guess I have no good segue to this one, but I know our last topic, I was talking about resolve, but it was kind of a vague container word. Yeah. If you guys haven't read my last post on my blog, which I'm finally getting back onto doing, it was about something about container words, where essentially you make things sound good, but they don't actually have any meaning behind it. So you fill up your own ego-invested meanings and then assume everybody else on the same page. Which, let's face it, the red pill is just full of those. When people talk about being your excellent self, your mental point of origin, they're not specific enough. And guys tend to put what they're already doing into these things, or alpha male is exactly a good one. Whatever I'm doing right now is what alpha males do, because that makes me into one. Then it's a weird narcissistic fantasy.
But I really loved your last essay, but I also kind of hate it.
Me too. I'm not even joking.
No, but the reason for it is what you were talking about was try and avoid the use of pointless container words to maintain your ego.
Yeah. And know when other people are using theirs to browbeat you into following whatever they want to do.
And, as they do, our more literal cadre of followers, whom we love dearly, but also occasionally hate, took that to mean never use container words ever.
Oh, it's
so I got that like 2 days after you dropped the essay. Someone got back to me like, hey, this sounds a lot like one of those container words Ryan said we shouldn't use. And it's like biggest fucking pet peeve with Twitter followers is when they're like, oh, this sounds like it contradicts something rational male said here, or this doesn't work with Donovan's rules about dating black girls that he put on in show 387. And it's like,
do you remember that Simpsons episode with the comic book guy talking about Itchy's magical rib? Yeah. That's all I could think of there.
Well, it reminds me of going to when Lord of the Rings came out. And I went to the premiere of that, and I was sitting behind a group of guys who dressed up to go to it and everything. And they were sitting like, oh, they obviously cut the scene on page 87. And it's like, well, thank you, Rain Man. It's like, I'm glad that you've read all the literature here, and you can say exactly which one of Rollo's 4,000 essays he said exactly what I now appear to contradict. But we are allowed to have different takes on things. It's not like it's not like the red.
Yeah, we're not a monolith.
Everyone's going to have slightly different takes on things. Like Rollo said, it doesn't matter, game doesn't make you look any better when your shirt comes off. But in my experience, once your shirt comes off, it doesn't really matter if you have a six-pack or not, because at that point the girl should be in her panties or naked. And I've had girls stop the escalation when you go for the breasts, go for the first undershirt, go to take their bra off, go to take their pants off, and go to take their panties off. But I very rarely had a girl who was completely naked be like, oh, fuck this, I'm not having sex with you because you took your shirt off and I can see you don't have a six-pack now. I was expecting a six-pack.
Oh, yeah, the only time I've ever seen something go that cold from that hot is when a guy says some triggering shit. It's the only time I've ever seen it.
Yeah, if a guy says something retarded at that point, like you take her clothes off and, you kind of spin her around to get a good look at her ass, and you're like, oh, cool, we have a tramp stamp.
Yeah.
At that point, I can see it going cold real fucking quick.
Talk about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, or, when the girl pulls that whole, or if the girl's giving you head and she deep throats, and the first thing you say, oh, damn, you probably had a lot of practice with this shit. At that point, you're kind of, that's not even, stepping on your own dick isn't even a good enough expression for that shit. But, your words are going to cock block you more than your look is going to cock block you at that point. The whole point of the look is just to kind of get in the door where she doesn't immediately disqualify you.
Yeah. Oh, it's all just a escalating series of emotional investments. And then once somebody's invested, and it's the same, way back when we first started this cast, you were talking about professionalism where you don't want to badmouth your boss because somebody else put him there. And by badmouthing him, you're telling them that their judgment is bad too. It's the same thing here. By you talking somebody out of whatever escalation point they're at, you're essentially telling them that their judgment is bad. And people hate that. You're attacking their ego directly with it. And no wonder why it takes that kind of thing to talk somebody out of sleeping with you. Fuck, I really wish I would have put that one together better. Anyways, whatever. But here's the question I had for you. So Resolve, I put that one up. Actually, you know what? Back to container words. The part I liked about this is when people are like, well, somebody said something 3 years ago that contradicts that. One, there's exceptions to the rule. There's always exceptions. This is social science, and it's not really a good science at that. So obviously there's going to be some nuances to it. So you're going to have to make it. It's like the French language. You always have to use the accent grave, except for in this case, or in this example here, in these 18,000 separate examples of why it doesn't work there. But the rules are hard and fast. That's just people. We're messy like that. And two, yeah, there could be an underlying thing that both of those fit into, but we just haven't articulated it yet. I mean, it's not Latin. We don't have a dead language here. Things are constantly growing.
Yeah, it's also like this contradicts something you said in an essay, 4 years ago. Well, I've written close to 500,000 words now, I think. And I always come back to a quote by John Maynard Keynes, who was an English economist.
Yep.
When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?
I like that. It's a subtle little dig. Oh, but so Resolve. The reason I was... Oh, sorry. Go finish your story, and then I'll ask you the question I was going to ask.
Go with Resolve.
Yeah. It's something I've noticed through Married Red Pill. I approach this mostly from the perspective of guys who are already in relationships, and they were either the girl's second choice, or they used to be the best guy, but then he's kind of slid back into that beta-dom, in lack of a better word here. So guys doing this, a lot of the times are fairly embarrassed about their situation. Everybody loves to be the hero in their story. And so if you end up being the jester, you're most likely embarrassed about talking about your failures. So what a lot of guys will do is they'll go on their own and they'll run a map, which, make yourself attractive, get rid of your unattractive behaviors, build abundance, and then make the hard decisions. I think I said it in my 2017 speech where you're making a deal with yourself when you start red pilling. Is you're going to make yourself a high value man, and in return to giving future you your high value in the sexual marketplace, you're tasking him with the responsibility of making the best of it. And so what'll happen is, guys, and it's always the 2-year mark. I don't know, there's got to be some kind of psychological thing behind it, but 2 years in their own bubble working on stuff, they end up with this giant covert contract, even though the first thing you learn is that a covert contract is a bad idea. And they make this covert contract saying, if I get in shape, if I start dressing better, if I have other girls that want to sleep with me, my wife or girlfriend will shape up and start treating me with the respect and desire that I deserve. And at the 2-year mark is when she basically calls their bluff. And it's when you notice that a lot of guys will hit one of two situations. One, they'll either be very whiny and complaining. They're like, I don't get it. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but she still won't have sex with me. What's up? Or they go the other route where they actually do treat, and this is the container word thing, they treat themselves as their masculine point of origin. And so they give their wives first crack at their libido. They just don't give her sole custody. And maybe they'll go pick up a girl on Tinder, on a business meeting, a hooker, whatever it is they do. They're like, you know what? I need to have sex because I'm losing my mind. And my wife's not doing it, and she can't stand me. And not only is she not doing it, she's berating me for even trying. So I'm just going to go get mine. And then they come back with this extreme guilt, like I'm not doing the right thing. And it's not so much a question as opposed to laying the roadmap and asking for your thoughts as a single and a divorced guy, I guess. Because, I mean, what else do you think we do here? You're looking out for your own self-interest. You're becoming a healthy narcissist as opposed to the unhealthy ones, which you've been talking about for the last hour. And once the guy gets to the point where he actually does become his own mental point of origin, he does start looking over his interests first, and then he does things that make him a little bit queasy. He starts to have second thoughts and wants to immediately go back to making everybody around him feel good. So I guess my question to you is, what happened? What's your thoughts on a guy who's either unwilling or doesn't have the stomach to possibly be the bad guy in somebody else's life story?
Well, let me start with, I think I know why it comes at the 2-year mark. Because if you start to look into it, if you're 20 to 40 pounds overweight and under muscled,
yeah,
it's going to take you 12 to 18 months of solid gym and diet control to get back into shape properly. And then you have to account for, the lag time with changing your personality, because you're going to have to go through some form of the 5 stages of grief with your old self. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while to change all those habits. But And to go to the question, I'm not sure. I kind of have a reputation for being a bit of a psychopath, so it's probably not the best, what's the deal with, guys having a guilty conscience. And I think for the most part, it's because they have this perception of themselves as a good man. And doing all this work, they're kind of framing it as I'm doing this for my wife to, make her deal better so she'll act the way I want. And that makes them a good man. And they have this perception of a good man, trademark, that has a certain characteristics, like he doesn't cheat, he puts duty over self, he does all these good things. And
all the be a real man stuff.
Yeah, and cheating is one of those things that guys have a trouble doing. Like I even notice it myself when I run plates. Like if I have a plate for like 6 months and she's on her good behavior and she's polite, she prioritizes seeing me, she's courteous, she's sexual, etc., I start to feel slightly guilty for banging other girls. And I haven't promised anyone monogamy. And I make jokes with them all the time about, banging other girls or, whatever. So they kind of subtly know that I'm probably doing that anyway.
Yeah, with plausible deniability where they don't make it overt, so it doesn't make her uncomfortable.
Yeah, because you don't rub a girl. Girls don't mind sharing and knowing that they're sharing an alpha, but they hate a guy who tells them, oh, I fucked another girl yesterday. Mm-hmm. Don't be that guy. So all these containers, I think we're kind of built in a way where we're either built or trained to kind of feel guilty about not being monogamous. So when they break their vows, they think, okay, I'm the first one who breaks them because I'm cheating on her. In reality, she broke them years before when she stopped having sex with him.
Yeah.
Even, regardless of, how much people want to say, well, you're not entitled to sex from your wife. Well,
she's entitled to rent, apparently, but
apparently she's, the way I see it, if you make a contract with a supplier of a given good or product or service,
mm-hmm.
and you give them a monopoly contract and they don't deliver, you can sue them for breach of contract. Unfortunately, you cannot sue your wife for breach of contract for not fucking you. If you could do that and, write it off against the alimony payments, I think the divorce law would be a lot more fun for men.
Oh, that would be, I would love to read those case law.
But I think what happens with them is they just haven't gotten around. They're still not putting themselves first. They're putting, what would everyone else think about me for banging a 23-year-old while my wife is at home?
Yeah. Oh, that part drives me nuts more than anything. Like we got this weird situation. So you get Aspergers, let's just call them, like they're on the spectrum, or at least they're acting in a way that it's safe to assume they're on the spectrum. And the big point of that is they're unaware of of how they're perceived socially by other people. They're missing whatever it is there. But then at the same time, so when we're single, yeah, I just want to bang a bunch of sluts and I'm going to talk shit and call out everybody, not aware how it makes you look socially. But then on the flip side, you get into a situation where you're with a girl for a couple of years and then you do something to make you the bad guy. All of a sudden, you have this skewed version of how you look, how people look at you from their social circle. It's like this weird compartmentalized version of how we are and we aren't worried about what other people think of us. And I get it. It's most likely there's two separate demographics of people here, but I just find it funny how we seem to be really good at sabotaging our mental state in that way. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's like a feminine, and I'm going to bring out my inner role on this. It's a feminine imperative thing. When it's about a bunch of dudes, because nobody cares about guys, you're more than happy to be on the spectrum and not give a crap about what they think of you. But as soon as it's a girl involved, now all of a sudden we're worried about our reputation.
Well, I think it comes down to, that for a lot of guys, I think that's where I struggled for a good while with Rollo's feminine imperative.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, to begin with, it struck me as, being very similar to, the patriarchy and the way feminists use it.
Oh, gotcha.
But when I reconceptualized it, as it's not like a huge it's not like a huge organization trying to do something. It's more of an emergent strategy, meaning that it's not. No one said that we're putting women first. No one's said that women get to define everything, but because you have all women kind of in, they're communists by nature.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest about it.
Oh, 100%.
And then you have a bunch of beta males who are like, if we agree with these girls, maybe they'll touch our willies. You get a kind of a movement that naturally acts to make the female the correct. And to girls, the worst thing that can happen is cheating.
Well, lying. Or the social. Here's the. This is such a nuance. I love talking about this. So, you know how we talked before about how they're willing to share an alpha, but they hate being saddled with a loyal beta. And a lot of people on Purple Pill Debate, for example, they had a hard time conceptualizing this. And I mentioned in my last video, this girl, Darla, where she had mentioned, imagine that guy who's married to a wife and he has a mistress on the side, and the mistress sticks with him for years because he says he's going to leave his wife for her. And she's willing to hold on to that. And then right there, all of a sudden, everybody understood because everybody kind of knows that trope of the mistress that sticks around, assuming the guy's going to leave his wife for her at some point, but he never does. Oh, crap. Where was I going with this one? What were we just talking about?
Cheating and lying.
Oh, yeah, cheating and lying. So here's the thing. So he's cheating and he's lying. But there's a plausible deniability around it. And the wife kind of knows that he doesn't have a business meeting at 10 at night on a Friday. So she knows he's cheating, but he's subtle about it. And he's not saying anything. And he gives her that plausible deniability. Same as when a girl says she won't sleep with you when you're single, but she's wearing the same color panties and bras. But what happens then is, let's say word gets out that he cheated on her. And now her social reputation is slammed because part of a girl's self-image is if you can get and keep a man. And that obviously means you're keeping him happy. But once it comes out that he's cheating, that attacks her reputation as being the good girl that knows how to keep a man happy. And I think that, more so than the cheating or the lying, is what matters. It's her reputation above all.
I think you have a good point. And I think that it's the same thing for the guy, because he's so invested in his reputation as a good guy and a good family man and so on, that him cheating kind of crushes that reputation.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, we always crap on sociopaths or psychopaths, but that mentality is the only one that seems to be able to distance themselves from this ego investment. And let's face it, it's a very self-sabotaging ego investment to actually look at what do I want and then how do I get it. Which I can see why then a lot of the hit pieces coming out calling us a bunch of narcissistic sociopaths, because imagine putting your ego aside. It seems like everybody has their ego in place to make them a good person in society. And just us saying that your wife gets first crack at your libido, not sole custody, is probably a huge psychopathic statement when you think about these kind of people, especially if they're in a frustrating relationship or a dead bedroom to begin with.
No, I think it's more a super ego than an ego, because what we're doing is we're letting our ego and our id override our super ego.
Mm-hmm.
I think what kind of defines a psychopath is that they don't have a superego per se, because the superego is for its conceptualization of the socialization process and how we learn how to be a human, in a sense.
Oh, yeah, agreed. And then through trauma or some kind of brain abnormality, they just don't have the capability. Yeah, I didn't want to assume that you could train psychopaths, because you clearly can't.
To some extent you can. And blunted affect helps. But my thing with it is just they always put themselves first. They're like, okay, I want to get laid. Is my wife putting up? No, I'll go fuck someone else.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they always put their own perspective first. And that's actually a very good trait. And it's kind of what goes back to Adam Smith to pull this in with economics. Because his whole argument is that an economy works the best when all the people involved in it are acting in their own self-interest. And that's what John Forbes Nash amended with the Nash equilibrium, which is that statement is not complete.
Because there's a certain point where no matter what you do, it's going to be a negative outcome or something like it. It's been a while since I've heard the Nash equilibrium, but I think I got it.
Well, the whole point with the Nash equilibrium is you get the best outcomes in an economy when each person acts in accordance with their own interests and with awareness of the choices of others. Like the example they have in A Beautiful Mind that I think is a perfect example for what we're talking about is there are 5 dudes in a bar of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 girls walk in, 1 blonde, 4 brunettes. Blonde is maybe 8 out of 10, brunettes 6 to 7.
Right.
And the whole idea is if all 5 of the guys go for the blonde, who's the one all of them want, then A, the blonde is not going to go home with any of them. And C, the brunettes are not going to be happy about being second choice. So they're going to turn them down as well.
So everybody loses.
But if 4 of the guys go for the brunettes first, then the blonde is going to start to wonder, okay, why are they going for my friends and not me? I'm the hot one. And then the last guy comes in, he gets the blonde after a subtle nag from all his friends going for the brunettes. So she's in a more open state to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I'm going with this is if you look at a man and a wife in a marriage with a dead bedroom, the wife has made the decision not to sleep with the man. So the man has to take her decision into account. And if he has other options in the marketplace, the natural choice there, if you're ego controlled, is to go for one of the other options, go bang a random hoe off Tinder or something.
Right.
However, you're super ego invested and you're more invested in the wife's perspective and society's perspective, then you're not going to make the choice that's right for your id, meaning your libido, and your ego, meaning your self-worth and feeling of self. And, the worst thing about it is the guy who spent all that time building himself up 2 years under a covert contract. I mean, imagine the blow to his ego when it's like, okay, I'm ripped, I'm 6'2", I've got all this muscle, I dress well, and my wife has a BMI of 45. She lives in Lululemons and hoodies. She hasn't combed her hair in 4 months, and she still won't fuck me.
Yeah.
Imagine that blow to the ego.
Oh, I can see it as a huge blow to the ego. It's essentially like nothing I ever do is good enough. I'm without worth. And as a guy, let's face it, like girls have intrinsic worth. They have a uterus, so it doesn't matter what happens. Somebody's going to, even if they lie to them, they're looking out for their best interest in their mind. As a guy, nobody gives a crap. There's God knows enough world star hip hop videos of guys getting curb stomped and everybody just treats it as a laugh. So I get that. But that's the thing too. Oh, here, sorry to tie you to your Nash thing. And that's funny you put it that way, where if you follow that through to its logical conclusion, is that these plow horses are getting put to pasture. Eventually, the girl becomes so unattracted at this guy who's essentially a plow horse. He's just a beast of burden, not sexual. He's completely denied. He's just beaten down and he's broken. And then they leave. And then what the problem is then is that once the girl leave, and that's the zeroed out thing that Rollo always talks about, the guy not only loses her, but he loses everything around him. Like all that stuff he was ego invested in. Like, I want society to think I'm a good man this, a good man that. So the girl that didn't have sex with him for all that time found a guy who made her tingle. And then she decided, I want to jump on this guy because my feelings come first. The I'm not happy meme. And at the end of the day, it ends up just being like a tragic Japanese film where the guy ends up just slowly. You remember Old Boy? That Korean film, actually? It's like that. At the end of the day, he was out for revenge, and his life just keeps getting worse and worse to the point where he cuts out his own tongue. And so at this point, how could you not become somewhat blunted affect, jaded, whatever term you want to use there, and start looking out for your own self-interest? Because you're right. If you let your ego decide and you start doing this Nash equilibrium where you're taking her feelings into account, and all you're doing for it is you're going to end up screwed in the end anyway. You even see it in divorces where guys will get divorced and they're still looking out to make things fair for the wife because, she was committed to me, so I should do the right thing by her. Meanwhile, she's screwing you over left, right, and center, financially, physically, everything but sexually. She's fucking you over. It's like, how could you not expect a guy to get a bit of a sociopathic veneer from that? And they just don't. It's this weird form of learned helplessness where even if that cage opens and you're given every opportunity to become a psychopath or a sociopath and become your own point of origin, you just don't take it because you're so used to getting beat down. It's just more comfortable than taking a bit of a risk, I guess.
Well, let's run some scenarios here just for fun.
Sure.
Okay, the guy's in a dead bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
He's improved himself to the point where he's done all the work.
Top 20%.
Yeah, and the wife still won't sleep with him.
Right.
Now, we have multiple. Okay, he could continue along the same vein, which just gives her a hotter and hotter husband who she's not sleeping with.
Right.
2, he could cheat on her and potentially suffer the blowback from that.
Mm-hmm.
C, he could divorce her before cheating on her, getting the blowback from that.
Right. Lose access to his kids, and then the fear of the finances. Essentially, there's going to be like negative consequences with that. Sure.
No matter what happens here, you get negative consequences. And the zero hypothesis is just him doing exactly what he's doing now and not getting what he wants out of it. So at that point, is he going to keep going? And is he going to have the discipline and motivation to keep going if there's no reward? Because at that point, he's saying, okay, he's using, improving himself as a means to an end. He wants to improve his relationship. If he sees that that's not the outcome, then working out, etc., and improving himself has to either it becomes the end in itself, he does it for its own sake, or B, he's going to stop doing it and regressing because he figures, well, she didn't fuck me when I was top 10%, so why not just go back to being comfortable at, the complete average and just chill out until I die. So there's only really...
Well, I would say a third choice then. Or I guess that's what you're going to get at, so I'll keep going.
So at that point, his only option is either go outside his marriage to get laid and get what he wants out of life, or it's going to be to, just say fuck it and let the chips fall where they may. And I think a lot of guys they like that stability. They're scared to rock the boat. They're perfectly fine with doing it when it only affects themselves, but they're scared to shit to do it when it influences their family, their potential community standing.
To be the bad guy in other people's life stories, essentially.
Yeah, but it's better than being what he is now, which is an extra in her life story.
Oh, man. It's funny you mentioned this. I remember we talked before, you were talking about the Gervais principle and Venkatesh Rao. He actually talked a lot about this in Tempo, where people would rather have a really crappy life story if they know what the ending is than have a story that could be good, but they're writing it as they go.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's kind of what I've seen with a lot of the guys that have come into the sphere and then left, is that they get to the point where they have to make that hard choice and potentially be the bad guy, and they back off. They just they reject the red pill, they find God, they start talking about politics and, start doing all that shit instead of,
Jungian mysticism and...
Yeah, and all that crap. So at that point, it's just they get to the point where it actually gets hard because everything that precedes it is just work. Just doing the fucking work. Let's be honest about it. I mean, going to the gym, it's not hard. You go into the gym, you lift some stuff, you have chocolate milk, and then you leave. Yeah, it's not hard. The difficult.
I'm glad you caught on to that, by the way.
Yes, it was awesome. Thanks to Real Zero there for that one.
Yeah, he's still in the chat too. Hey, what's up? RZD, we want to get you on here one of these days, by the way. We're going to chat with you afterwards.
So one of the things with it is just going to the gym is not hard. It's the same thing someone said about losing weight at one point. It's easy, but it's difficult. And what they meant by that is what you have to do to lose weight is pretty simple. You just have to eat less calories than you burn. Right. But doing that consistently over a long period of time with some degree of discipline, that's hard.
Yeah, actually rewiring your normal behaviors, your normal patterns. There's social influences that you have to turn down. There's a whole lot attached to it. Yeah.
And, I think the guy here who's been, he's in great shape. He's gone out and had fun buying a new wardrobe. He likes the looks he's getting. He loves getting the compliments. And now he gets to the point where it actually becomes hard, where he potentially has to be the bad guy. And at that point, they're like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's against my morality or, it's against my values or,
insert excuse here, yeah.
Whatever. And it's always just some rationalization for why they're not doing what they know they have to. And, divorce is a pain in the ass. I mean, you have to deal with lawyers, you have to deal with your soon-to-be ex-wife, you have to do lifestyle management afterwards. You're going to probably have some issues financially. You have to,
and if she's the one that initiated, you also have to like emotionally distance yourself from somebody, and flipping that like a switch is not easy.
No, so it's just I think that's kind of what it comes down to is just having to do that hard psychological work, because everything else is external and physical. It's work, and men usually are willing to do the work because they've been doing the work for their wives for years. You know, laundry, dishes, chore play, that whole deal.
Back rubs.
So that's just a reprioritization of, yeah, where did that logic come from? If I give her a back rub, I get a blowjob. Where the fuck does that reasoning come from?
And she just said it because she wanted a back rub, and so use the right correct choices. You know, I'd probably be giving me more back rub or more blowjobs if my back didn't hurt so much when I did it. It's such a weak argument, but the guy, all he heard was blowjob, and his brain just like, just do it. Somebody gave you a path, just take it.
Yeah, well, I think that's the kind of the issue, and I think that's a good, in a say, ending note. It's just like guys come to the red pill and they want this GameSpot strategy guide to getting pussy, and that's just not what we do. At least it's not what I do, because I can say what you want out of life, but if you give me an indication of what you want out of life, I can possibly help you walk that path, because I've done a lot of different things in my life.
Yeah.
So you can probably, and it's just about, you know, what do you want out of this thing? It's like when you walk into porn stars, so I almost said porn stars, but porn stars, and the guy behind the counter is like, okay, this is a nice something. How much do you need to get out of it? And it's the same thing with, you know, the red pill. When you come here, it's like, okay, what do you want to get out of it? Do you want to get laid more? Do you want to get into better shape? And, you know, the whole reason I wrote Building Value was just, I saw that, okay, there are a ton of guys coming and finding the red pill, and they start doing all these types of self-improvement, and, you know, they're doing everything at once. Like, they're working out, they're eating better, they're catching up on their sleep, they're redoing their wardrobe, they're learning game and doing their approaches, they're reading all the literature, and it's just so much shit to do that you kind of have to prioritize in order of importance. Because like, if you're trying to quit caffeine, sugar, and nicotine at the same time, you're fucked. You're going to be a miserable bastard for months. So it's better to just cut those sequentially. And it's the same thing with, if you start out with like the case study I did at the end of my book about the Dave the train wreck, like, if you're 100 pounds overweight, you're broke, you have no education, you work a dead-end job, you haven't been laid since, you know, that one time in college when the girl touched your wee-wee after she...
Last time you were laid, you looked at the Twin Towers.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe you were in them. But anyway, so what I'm getting at is you have to kind of figure out, okay, what are the major things that are going to take a long time? What are the short and small things you can do easily? And how do you, like, if you're planning on losing 100 pounds, buying a new wardrobe is stupid. That's a waste of money. Right. But if you're going to spend a year losing weight, you can probably do 2 or 3 other small things while you're doing that. Okay, you know, a complementary thing would be, since you're already watching what you eat, you can grocery plan and save some money on groceries. Or, you know, if you're going to the gym anyway, you can throw in some extra cardio to burn the extra calories. Or you can throw in some weightlifting on top of the cardio to build some muscle, or at least maintain the muscle mass you have. And
you can start establishing that your attention is valuable. And so, like my gym bag routine, if you're going to sit here and berate me for an hour, I'm just going to go to the gym. And so you can establish your frame. There's tons of things you can do.
And just working with that and trying to kind of prioritize the things in order of importance and how long they're going to take you. So that's why I made that whole framework, to kind of analyze your situation, analyze your context in life, figure out a strategy, and having a vision and mission in your own life, and then working to implement that strategy into your life based on planning and having key performance indicators.
I think that's why we get along so well, because we kind of have the same approach, but yours is a little more refined than mine. I just work backwards. Like, what do you want? And then work backwards from there.
And that's essentially what the strategy in Gendernomics 2 is. It's just starting with, okay, what do you want and where are you now? What do you need to fix about yourself that you have control over? And what is the problem with your current environment? Like, if you want to quit heroin, it's probably not smart to hang around Jim Morrison constantly.
All right, so I know you wanted to close off. We're coming up on the hour here. I got to catch a flight anyway. I'm going to go sailing. My buddy just bought a boat. Guys, thank you for sticking it out this long. I see you guys have been just crazy in the chat. I know we try to engage you guys more, but I'm not going to lie. Carl, and I'm sure you agree, this is probably the most fun podcast and most engaging one I think I've ever had with you or anybody.
It was a fun one, but I had one chat question from early on in the chat, so I hope the little Maddie is still around. Because he asked, in your new book you've written, as male valuations are more diverse, it means that your average woman will experience higher volatility but less variability in men's valuations of her. What I mean by this is a fat girl is going to be very volatile in terms of attractive, unattractive, but she's going to be pretty much across the board viewed in a certain way. Because men can like any type of woman. If you go on Pornhub, you can find any type of woman. You can find a category dedicated to that type of woman. You know, fat black girls, skinny goth chicks, tattooed Asian trans women, whatever the fuck. You can find you can find that. So that means women will have a higher volatility in how many men want them, but less variability in how successful they are in the sexual marketplace. So that's all that means, really, is that all women can get laid by default. Women are there for any fetish. There's a woman who embodies that fetish. But for guys, women have a narrower view of men. So all that means is that
Actually, I can handle this. You know the good quote for that? Guys need endless variability, and girls are simple. They'll just settle for the best.
Yeah, it's something like that. So, like, if a guy is in shape and above the what I call the hurdle rate of, you know, you have to be this high SMV for me to ride you type thing for the girls. Mm-hmm. At that point, you're golden. You just need to cultivate your skills, because you're not going to gain that much more by becoming more, being more over the hurdle rate. But for girls, it's more about you're always going to be able to find someone who will fuck you. So that's all that means. I hope that was a good explanation.
All right. Well, that's good. Okay, guys. Gendernomics 2 is just out now. There's going to be a link in the description. There's going to be an affiliate code on it, but it's going to be Carl's affiliate code. Figure the least he can do is profit from his own book there. I do suggest you guys to check it out. I'm getting through it now. I'll probably, and I know Jack Napier is setting up a review on it where we can talk about it like a little book report, like the nerds we are. Same time, feel free, check out the stuff on rhinestone.com. We can have our own little chats like this. I can start develop exactly what we were talking about there, our proper male action plan with you, where we can handle with some discretion, as well as little one-off consults. Thank you guys so much. We went way over time right now, but I'll catch you guys later. Cheers.